True Gangsters of Yesterday presents the Gambino's Gemini crew versus the Gotti crew versus the Castellano faction. Acting Captain Nino Gaggi of the Gambino family's Gemini crew. When Big Paul Castellano first reached out to John Gotti to clip Roy DeMeo for him, John Gotti turned down that order because at that time he hated his own boss and eventually killed and replaced him as boss, and it's unheard of to turn down an order from a boss, but John Gotti had enough balls to do just that. But before John Gotti replaced Paul Castellano as boss of the Gambino family, Paul handed down the order to the people closest to Roy, that being his own crew, and his acting skipper, Nino Gaggi, and his top enforcers, the Gemini twins, who teamed up with Lucchese, member Anthony Casso, to clip Roy. This was the ultimate betrayal. Not only was the Gambino family his own family after him, but now his very own crew was. They would all together, minus a few members, but with the help of Casso of the Lucchese family, with also the promise of making the Gemini twins made men in the Lucchese family, releasing them from the Gambino family. Anthony Casso was now the leader of his own personal hit squad, consisting of himself, the mafia cops, and the Gemini twins, with Casso being under his boss Vic Amuso's umbrella. Unknown to Vic, Anthony had a more powerful personal crew of his own. Anthony Casso, Nino Gaggi, and the Gemini twins killed Roy and shoved him into a trunk, turning him into what the mafia calls trunk music, based on the noise a victim makes when they are being thrown or stuck in a trunk. Gambino boss Paul Castellano, an underboss of the Lucchese family, an associate of Paul's who also shared a seat on the commission with other bosses like themselves, such as Vic Amuso, Casso's boss, and Vincent the Chin Gigante, the boss of the Genovese family, and Philip Rastelli of the Donano family, along with Carmine the Snake Persico of the Colombo family, with others like acting boss Vic Arena and Castellano loyalist Daniel Marino, and others on the panel. Other notable figures on the panel at the time, such as Bonanno, Powerhouse, acting boss Anthony Sparrow, and Bonanno, underboss Sal Vitale, and Bonanno boss Joe Messina, who both later became informants for the government. Believe it or not, at one time the Bonanno family was kicked off the panel, and a move was also made to make the Irish gang, the Westies, a part of the Gambino family, and also to leave Joe Bonanno out of commission, with him taking on a less active role and being basically exiled to Arizona, where he would write books about his life. Why did the Gemini twins cross the leader of the Gemini crew, Roy DeMeo? Because Casso and Castellano could have clipped them along with Roy, but instead Casso told them, do this hit and you won't get killed. Instead, I'm going to give you both made man buttons, and you're going to rise through the ranks of the Lucchese family after being released from the Gambinos. Reason for the hit: Paul Castellano had court coming up and had a giant indictment hanging over his head. After Roy doing everything Paul asked of him, and Roy doing all Paul's dirty work, with Roy just being loyal and wanting to become a made man. Becoming a made man was achieved by Roy, but it came with no made man privileges. Roy was killed on Big Paul Castellano's orders on January 10th in the year of 1983, or you could say on Castellano and Casso's orders, as this was a collab hit between the two families, the Gambinos and the Lucchese, with the Gemini twins being one time Gambino members turned Lucchese-made members with the release from the Gambino family with the promise of being made into the Lucchese family. Roy arrived at a crew member's home in East Flatbush for a meeting where he was ambushed by his own Gemini crew, along with Anthony Casso. DeMeo sat down and was handed a cup of coffee when the two Gemini twins, Anthony Center and Joey Testa, shot Roy to death. He was struck by a bullet to the hand, trying to cover his face while being shot up by his former pals. He was also shot a few times in the head. His body was shoved into his own trunk with a chandelier placed on top of his frozen dead body. Roy is not known as an informant, but was found with a tape recorder inside the trunk when authorities pulled his dead body from the trunk of Roy's very own Cadillac. It could have already been in the trunk, or Roy was recording information for later leverage on the Gambino family. The Gemini twins could have thrown it inside with him to make people speculate if he was a rat or not. The chandelier Roy was taking to Goodwill for his wife, but unfortunately it never made it, and either did Roy, as he was ultimately backstabbed by his own Gemini crew, getting its name from their social club, the Gemini Lounge, where many came in but never left as Roy and his crew used the lounge to lure its victims. The Gemini twins is an alias given to both Anthony Center and Joey Testa for looking so much alike to the point where people called them the Gemini twins. And Anthony was also called Tony the Twin. Authorities have linked the Gemini crew to over 200 murders. The Gemini twins, besides being professional killers, were also involved with car theft rings and people who got in the way of the Gemini. Twins making money were clipped by the mafia duo. The Gemini twins were found guilty on 10 counts of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, but were somehow recently released, with Anthony Center being released on 2023 and Joey Testa being released in 2024. Testa died shortly after of cancer in 2026. Anthony Center, one half of the Gemini twins. They were given a compassionate release under the new law, with the government stating they served the maximum amount of time under the new law, while those under the old law will stay confined behind bars. Some mob enthusiasts and mob specialists don't believe this to be true. Some have came up with the theory that they may have cooperated or gave important information to the FBI. Shortly after being released, farm property belonging to the Gambino family was dug up by the FBI. The duo once belonged to the Gambinos, but came out of prison as Lucchese-made members, only loyal to Lucchese. Could this have been a jab at the Gambino family they both once belonged to? As of now, there is no solid proof that the Gemini twins or Roy DeMeo ever cooperated with the FBI. For now, this is simply speculation, but it's damn interesting. When John Gotti wouldn't do the hit on Roy, acting skipper Nino Gaggi would step in, knowing that Roy trusted him and the Gemini twins. Big Paul Castellano meets his match and is destroyed by Captain, now boss, John Gotti, with Big Paul furious with Gotti and his crew, like Gotti crew member Angelo Quack Quack Ruggiero for getting caught selling heroin along with John's brother Gene Gotti. They put together a hit squad and had Frankie DeCicco set up Big Paul to be shot and killed outside of Manhattan's Sparks Steak House, with John Carneglia landing the kill shot on Big Paul. As one of the backup shooters froze up or gun jammed, Carneglia was there to finish what they started. Quack, Quack, Eddie Lino, and Joe Watts were backup shooters as Sammy Gravano communicated with the shooters via walkie-talkie. The hit was a success, with the Gotti crew taking out Big Paul Castellano and his beloved personal bodyguard, and one-time underboss Tommy Bellotti. Unfortunately, after the hit, John Gotti's personal bodyguard, Bobby Borriello, was killed for the unsanctioned hit on Big Paul. Bobby was killed in his own driveway after having dinner at the Ravenite Social Club. He was found dead with a broken jar of pasta sauce he brought home from the Ravenite Club. Bobby Borriello, Gotti's personal bodyguard and driver, was killed, along with DeCicco, who was car bombed by Anthony Casso and Vic Amuso. Bobby was killed by Casso and his men, or on Casso's orders, with also orders from the commission passed down to Casso. Bobby was shot 7 times and died on April 13th in the year 1991. Originally with the Gallo crew, after the death of Joe Gallo, Bobby found a new home with the Gambino family and was loved by John Gotti and John Gotti Jr. Bobby and others got to see the end of Paul Castellano's faction of the Gambino family, but unfortunately for Bobby, he was murdered as retaliation for the hit on Big Paul. The Gotti crew won the war versus the Paul Castellano faction, but the aftermath was not pretty. Bobby and Frankie paid the ultimate price. Big Paul Castellano loyalists blamed Frankie DeCicco for Paul's death, along with John Gotti and anyone loyal to John Gotti over Paul Castellano. Anthony Casso, Vic Amuso, and Vincent the Chin Gigante wanted revenge on the Gotti crew for doing an unsanctioned hit on Big Paul Castellano. This was the aftermath the Gotti crew suffered after taking out Big Paul. But at the end of the day, they accomplished setting up and killing a boss they had no respect for. Big Paul was dead, and Gotti was crowned the new boss of the Gambino family. Gotti saw what he wanted, and he took it. But he lost some great pals along the way. Frankie was blamed the most for what happened to Big Paul, so oppositions took opportunities to hurt Gotti or his crew, but totally failed when it came to eliminating John Gotti. John Gotti was a force to be reckoned with. Gotti would eventually get ratted on by close crew member Sammy Gravano, and with Gravano's testimony ended up in prison for life. Gravano would also testify against Vincent the Chin Gigante of the Genovese for the hit on his best pal, Frankie DeCicco. John Gotti was indicted for the murder of Big Paul Castellano in the month of December in 1990, and the murder took place in 1985. Sammy Gravano turned informant and testified against John Gotti. Mr. Gotti was also found guilty of federal racketeering along with 5 other murders and was sentenced to life without parole. He would serve his time in USP Marion, Illinois, where Gotti was treated horribly by the prison system and the government. Other charges include tax evasion and obstruction of justice. Check out my USP Marion, Illinois prison documentary for more information on John Gotti's prison time, located on my channel. Gotti died in federal prison on June 10, 2002. Was the murder of Big Paul the fall of John Gotti? Is this what brought him down? Or was it informants like Sammy Gravano and other informants like longtime informant Willie Boy Johnson? Thanks for watching. True Gangsters of Yesterday.